Hi, it's GameKave.
Yes, it's GameKave, our video game analysis conversational duo thing about industry topics.
Yeah, and we had a very interesting news story come across, what was it, like a couple weeks ago now, where only 50% of the people who are on a PS4 have moved to a PS5. And the statistics on other platforms, be it graphics cards for PC or Xboxes, are actually similar, or in some cases significantly worse than that. But when you go and you look at like the top 10 graphics cards on Steam, it's like 20 series, 10 series, 30 series. Like,
so a lot of stuff from 7 years ago now?
2 to 7 years ago, yeah, depending.
1080 Ti, man.
Yeah.
Still hanging
1080 Ti, just killing it, just out here. They made it. I am sure there is someone at NVIDIA that got fired for making that card too good. So, and it got us thinking about how this generation jump, be it on PC when you move graphics cards, like if you're going to a 20 series or 30 series to a 40 series, the jump isn't that huge. Or a PS4 to a PS5, especially if you are on a PS4 Pro, like, there's a difference. You notice it.
You could argue going from 30, depending on which card you're going from.
Yes.
If you're going from a 3080 to a 4080, you could argue that there is a big difference in terms if you're just comparing strictly performance. But much like the narrative that we've been going on all year about games being extremely expensive to produce, and games and hardware being so expensive to buy, people are hanging on to their old stuff longer. So yes, I'm sure the 4080 Ti outdoes the 3080 Ti very well, but you're also paying $1,200, $1,500?
$1,200, $1,400
to get that upgrade. Well, this isn't new, but I actually don't really know how younger people feel about going from PS4 to PS5, whether it's mind-blowing as we felt when we were much younger, when everything was new.
And the jumps then were, like, bigger. Like, I think about, like, my first big jump, because, like, when I started playing video games, 3D existed, so, like, I just thought the N64 and PS1 were, like, oh yeah, no, this is the.
I mean, yeah. If we want to like start from like the earlier times, like you could look at each generation was so distinctly different from each other, because you look at let's say Atari 2600. I don't want to go back to Pong. You know, you got like 8 colors and very very rudimentary stuff. Then you go to NES, and you're talking about, like, ooh, now you got lots more pixels on the screen, very rudimentary. But now you have music that's playing continuously at least.
Characters. Like, holy
and then
shit.
You go to Super Nintendo, the you could argue the peak of 2D. Yep. 2D being it. Just like, you know, much like everything that that Master System and NES did, but now like more, and then the jump to 3D.
Yeah, like, and you want to talk about something that's like a perfect example in our lifetime. Like, my first jump I very much remember was like PS1 to PS2. Holy shit, the characters have real hands.
They got a real face with a moving chin.
Yeah, they got, like, it looks like a person now. Everything on the N64, for those of you who, you know, have never seen this and didn't grow up with it, everything looked like a blurry mess because they didn't have any memory for textures. To the GameCube, or PS1 to PS2, where it's like, oh, everything has real textures now, and everything, like, you see real faces.
Yeah, not just graphics, but like audio also. You've got actual audio,
like a full orchestra,
like a full proper audio, recorded audio track can now be played and spliced.
Yep.
To fit the situation.
And it's surround sound if you have the setup. PS2 had an optical port on it.
Yep.
So you could hook it into your surround system, and I remember doing that. I remember playing Final Fantasy X in the living room on my dad's giant 65-inch TV, and you see that cutscene where, like, the giant wave from Sin happens, and it's the most mind-blowing thing at the time. Going from PS2, Xbox, GameCube to 360 and PS3, where, oh, it's HD now. Granted, you have to have the TV to drive it, or in some cases it would look real bad. Hi, Dead Rising's text, Metal Gear Solid 4's text. But you had, like, fully, really detailed faces now.
Yeah, you have pretty sharp textures.
Yeah.
Like, we see very sharp textures now, but you could argue that the 360, PS3 era was when they made those textures quite sharp.
The jump, like, even the early 360 stuff, like, I remember playing Gears of War 1. And
that was one of the very early whoa.
Another real early woe for me was Oblivion and Dead Rising. Oblivion, when you get out of that sewer and you're like, look at this massive, beautiful world.
Look at the mountain. Look at how far you can see. Look at the beautiful lighting and colors we have.
Just like the other one, like Dead Rising, like, this mall is huge and look at all this shit we are putting on the screen. Like, that you can interact with and interact with each other. Like,
that was the era of, like, when physics was becoming a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because instead of it being like kind of like a hard-coded script or probably something like that, you're having like actual like ragdoll physics and bodies interacting with each other.
Yes, absolutely. You started to get a feature jump as well.
What features were you looking at in, say the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Sega Saturn days? You were like, okay, you could play games together.
Yep.
2-player.
That was the NES really.
Yeah, 2-player, 4-player. Game Boy, you could stick on some attachments.
Yeah.
You had to buy attachments. Like, N64 could go online in Japan, but you had to buy, like, this really big thing that attaches on the underside.
N64 had the expansion pack, which doubled the RAM, and a whole 6 games
It gave me longer replays in Madden 2000.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
It was required to play Majora's Mask.
It was required well, it wasn't required to play Perfect Dark's multiplayer, but if you wanted to play Perfect Dark's campaign, it needed it.
Wow.
But, like, as for features, though, like, of course, from SNES to 64 is 3D.
Yeah.
And then 4 controller ports. And Rumble came along eventually, but it was an add-on.
Yeah.
And in the case of the PS1, it got it got analog sticks in general, but it got 2 of them later.
Okay, yeah.
So
like, you kind of got, like, hardware.
Yeah, you got
expanded hardware, I guess you could call that.
And you got your one big tech jump. And to be fair, that tech jump was huge.
It's usually like sound and graphics.
Yeah, it was like
and also the ability for games to be designed around that huge new thing.
Right.
Going from a 2D space to a 3D space is huge. And then you had this big bulky thing with an enormous Duke controller
and a hard drive. It had a hard drive built in,
and it's called the Xbox.
And the Xbox was the one that really was like, you can take this online, you can download additional content. You want more cars in Project Gotham? You want more maps in Halo? You can download that. You can chat with your friends and all this other stuff, and it was kind of the start of that. And PS2 had its own version of that. It just wasn't as good, but it did have a way you could add a hard drive to it and play Final Fantasy XI. Then you got to the 360, and I remember the 360 feature set being revealed like a month or two. Like, I was all in on the 360. This sounded like the coolest goddamn console in the history of the world, and to be fair, in hindsight, it kind of was. They weren't doing just DLC now, they were doing downloadable games, and I remember loading up that 360 during launch week and downloading Geometry Wars for $5. And it's like, oh, I got this really awesome game for one, $5, and two, I got it now, like right now, at my house downloaded. And then a big thing that my friend group really liked on the original Xbox was like being able to chat while playing games, but it wasn't cross-game. We all had to play Halo 2 together. We all had to play Madden. So the Xbox 360 was like, yo, you and your friends can be playing 2 different games and chatting, and then they went from 2 people doing it to 8 with parties. And then another thing the 360 added, once again, a lot of people take it for granted, a lot of people are into it. I know my girlfriend's super into it. Achievements. That was a 360 thing. That didn't exist.
It was just like, dude, you got this achievement, and you could actually see how people progressed and what feats they got in a game.
Yeah, like, I remember when Halo 3 came out, I was such a big Halo fan at the time, I was like, I need to get all the achievements in Halo 3. Like, I need to. Like I need to get this 1,000 points.
You could watch, you could, like, download movies. 360 did that.
Yep, that was a first for 360. You know, like, downloading movies.
Watching shows, bringing Netflix to Xbox 360.
I remember when Netflix was first announced, a lot of people, I remember in the gaming space having conversations with people, and they're like, I don't get the big deal about this, and I'm like, I do. Being able to just pay a sub, go to a movie, be entertained, like, this is gonna eat cable's lunch if it stays anywhere near cost effective.
And we found out later that was the case.
Yeah.
You know, like granted, like, later on, feature sets kind of became... They got kind of obsessed with feature sets, and that's when probably everybody got a little frustrated that their gaming system is not really a gaming system. It's now like, why is there a Pizza Hut app on my Xbox? Why is there all this...
Please put that footage over that.
It's a hot deal. It's a hot deal.
It's getting hot over here. Oh, boy. Allow. Yeah, alright. That's fine.
Oh, man. I'm glad I was here with you for this. This is the downfall of Western civilization. This is awful.
You look at how, like, PC in general, there isn't, like, PC 98 and PC 04 as a generation.
Yeah, it's...
And you could look at hardware generation because everything is, like, forwards and backwards compatible. So it's like defining PC generations. It's almost like you have to look at games.
You have to look at games, and I think you have to look at big jumps to where in feature set for hardware, like, oh man, this graphics card, this era, this is when the physics started happening for the graphics card.
Dual core processing.
That was a huge one. I remember, like, that was a, dual core processors, and I think that, it is the games. Like, I think that this probably says more about me and World of Warcraft than it does PC gaming. But I did very much remember, like, up until the release of World of Warcraft, it was like shooters and RTS games. After the release of World of Warcraft, it is World of Warcraft until like 2013, 2014 on PC. That is it. That is PC gaming for me, is fucking, in that period at least, is fucking World of Warcraft.
If all you do is you play like a game that has perpetually existed for decades, do you even notice the hardware as much? Is generations defined by games? So, like, I could, so World of Warcraft. The fact that there has to be World of Warcraft Classic and retail kind of says about how different the game has evolved over its almost 20-year existence. You got the beginning 2D era, you got Zelda, then you had Zelda 2 and Link to the Past. Then you have what I like to call the Ocarina of Time era games, which goes from Ocarina of Time to Skyward Sword, where you have auto jumping, dungeons, puzzles, Hyrule Field. Just kind of like
some weird traversal system, like a boat or a horse or a bird.
Right, but but you can tell like there's like a formula or a way to achieve that look. And then we're in what you could call the Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom era, where it's not really the same as Ocarina of Time.
I think this is the big part of why you're not seeing the transition from PS4 to PS5 or Xbox One to Series X or upgrading graphics cards, is because so much of games now is live service or a lack of evolution as a whole. So it's like, well, if my friend group plays Destiny and I play Destiny every week, I can still play Destiny on a PS4 or PS4 Pro. It doesn't look as good, it doesn't load as fast, but I can still play it.
Yeah, and that's a game series that came out in 2014.
Yeah, like if I really love, like Fortnite, for example, I can still play it. I don't need, like, would it be nice to have prettier, better running Fortnite? Yeah, but like, I don't need to move. There are some games on these platforms that I have played that I definitely think are like, oh yeah, this is definitely a PS5 game. They are mostly games made by Insomniac.
Yeah. That's my immediate thought. Is like Spider-Man 2,
Spider-Man 2, Ratchet and Clank,
$375 million.
Yep, you get to see that. You get to see all the money. There's a couple of things why this transition was so hard. COVID happened, meaning less units got out there, and development times increased. So, like, whatever games you're playing this year, realistically, probably should have came out 1 to 2 years ago.
Right.
Every game got delayed by a year or two in some cases. So that means all the stuff that it was specifically for PS5, specifically for higher-end GPUs, specifically for Series X, got pushed. So you had, like, a way longer transition period. Because every console since the 360 era has had this transition period, where you're getting, like, on 360, the Battlefield game came out on original Xbox and the 360. Destiny came out on the PS3 and the PS4. And that was going to be fine for this generation if everything just didn't get stretched super hard because of COVID. And then the other factor, which we talked about in the Soul of Your Game episode, please go watch that, is cost is so high, so you want to be on as many platforms as possible. So unless you are a platform holder, so you're Microsoft, Nintendo, or Sony, you're having this issue of, shit, I want to make a game that is like, wow, pushes this hardware, but I also want to be able to sell it to as many people as possible.
But you also don't want to take too much of a risk that if it doesn't pan out, you're not, like, losing hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right. Like,
you don't want it to bomb.
And as for generations in general, yeah, for me at least, it's a combo. It's still, like, visuals and feature set mainly. Like, I think of, like, the PS4 era of when you could, like, the big feature there was, like, yes, it's finally full 1080p, no upscaling, it's actual 1080p. And also, hey, you can press a button and be live streaming it instantly. The stuff I see on PS5 is, like, yeah, the graphical fidelity jump isn't super huge. It's there, especially if they, like, develop specifically for it. But it's mainly, like, the SSD stuff is, like, on the PS5 menu.
Well, that's gaming generations.
What do you think is a generation? What is your favorite generation?
Yes. And maybe it's your generation of game, generation of hardware, generation of features.
Yes. Maybe you just played League of Legends for 15 years, and that's all you know.
And I actually really want to know, like, for people who, for especially younger groups and groups who usually stick with a game for a long time, because that's a very common thing now, what defines a generation within that game? Because we know about World of Warcraft, we know about Zelda, we can name, like, franchise eras,
yeah.
But, in League of Legends, I haven't played that game in 11 years.
I have not played it in 10 years.
How's that game changed over the 10... 15 years that game has persisted?
Yep.
I would really like to know. It's a really good question, because it's starting to look like hardware and features maybe somewhat, but hardware is
it's becoming less important.
It's quite plateaued.
Yep.
It's costing a lot to get the most out of it, and it's costing a lot to utilize it too.
Which is
it's
why
not like in the old days where you had to figure out some way to fit Pokemon in 64 kilobytes or something.
No, but which is why portable gaming's so popular. We did a whole episode on that. You should go watch that. All right. Thank you guys. We love you. Bye. We'll see you next time.
I'm keeping an eye on that Snorlax.
It's plotting.
And the Murloc.
It's plotting. They're both plotting.